Colton Hayes stepped out of his black Aston Martin, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes like the echo of a past he wasn't ready to confront. His sharp blue eyes scanning the towering silhouette of the mansion that once felt like a sanctuary, but now loomed like a mausoleum. The wind rustled through the empty trees that lined the drive, whispering memories he'd tried to bury across European coastlines. But heartbreak has a way of following you like a ghost that never sleeps. The moment he stepped into the grand foyer, the scent of dust and faded cologne met him. No laughter, no warm greetings, only the hollow creak of a chandelier swaying slightly, as if mourning his return. This place used to pulse with life. Lavish parties, clinking champagne flutes, spontaneous dancing in the hallways. But since Madeline's betrayal, since she had exchanged love for luxury with his best friend Graham, everything had gone still. Even the walls seemed to recoil from him, as though they knew he no longer carried joy in his footsteps. He wandered through the marble corridors, each portrait on the wall mocking him with smiles frozen in time. And when he finally reached the study, the fireplace remained cold, just like his chest. He poured himself a glass of scotch, more out of habit than need, and stared at the firewood stacked inside the hearth, untouched, lifeless, mirroring the man he had become. Hours passed with no agenda, just silence and the gentle hum of loneliness threading itself through the halls, like ivy reclaiming stone, until the subtle scent of rosemary and garlic drifted through the air, unfamiliar yet comforting. Curiosity stirred, a faint ember in his chest, and he followed the trail into the heart of the house, the kitchen. There, bathed in soft light and back turned toward him, stood a woman humming under her breath as she chopped vegetables with the grace of someone who found rhythm in the ordinary. She moved like she belonged there, not as staff, but as someone who made space her own. Her golden brown hair caught the light, tied loosely, wisps escaping to brush her cheek, and she wore no makeup, yet held a natural beauty that felt undemanding, real. "You're back earlier than expected," she said without turning, her voice laced with quiet confidence, not the scripted courtesy he was used to. Caught off guard, Colton replied with a hesitant, "You must be the new cook." And when she turned to face him, green eyes met blue with a steadiness that disarmed him completely. Scarlett Monroe. He would never forget that name after today. She smiled, not the sugary kind people offered when they wanted something from him, but the smile of someone who had nothing to prove and no intention of pretending. There was something magnetic about her presence, like she didn't fear his silence or his title, like she could see the fractures behind the polished facade and wasn't afraid to stand in their presence. "Dinner will be ready in 20, she added, wiping her hands on her apron and returning to the stove, unfazed by the man who once commanded boardrooms with a glance. He remained still, watching, unsettled yet intrigued. She wasn't just cooking a meal. She was crafting comfort, infusing warmth into every stir and slice like she was healing something without knowing it. He took a seat at the far end of the kitchen island, the chill in his bones slowly beginning to thaw in the glow of her quiet energy. Every movement she made brought life back into the space. The clatter of utensils, the subtle humming, the soft crackle from the skillet. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like a ghost in his own home. She offered him a bowl of soup without asking what he wanted, and he accepted without resistance, surprised by how natural it felt. With each spoonful, he realized he hadn't tasted anything so sincere in a long time. It wasn't about the spices. It was the intention, the care, the unspoken warmth layered into each bite. Scarlett didn't try to fill the silence with meaningless chatter. She let it exist, respectfully, but somehow made it feel less heavy. Colton didn't speak much that evening, but his eyes followed her every move, studying her as one might study a poem written in a language they'd long forgotten, but deeply missed. She moved through the kitchen as if unaware she was softening stone, coaxing life into the walls, healing something broken without ever naming it. He didn't know who she was beyond her name and title, didn't know what pain she might be hiding beneath that steady gaze. But in that single hour, she changed something he thought was unchangeable. And as he retreated to his room later that night, his footsteps softer, his glass untouched, the mansion didn't feel so hollow anymore. Maybe the walls would never forget the betrayal, but now they had something new to hold on to. As the door closed behind him and the scent of rosemary lingered in the air, Colton realized something astonishing. She wasn't just cooking meals. She was cooking warmth into a house long gone cold. Colton found himself drawn back to the kitchen more often than he cared to admit, as if Scarlett Monroe's presence was a silent anchor pulling him from the stormy seas of his past. Her laughter was light, almost melodic, a delicate mask that hid deeper wounds beneath its surface. Every witty remark she tossed his way seemed to carry a subtle weight, a hidden story only hinted at in the flicker of her green eyes when she thought no one was watching. Those eyes held storms, fierce and unspoken, a tempest shaped by secrets she guarded fiercely, and Colton sensed that behind the charm and confidence lay a heart weathered by pain and silence. He began noticing how she would flinch at unexpected noises, or how her smile would falter for a brief second when memories invaded her mind, yet she never let her guard down completely. This enigmatic woman who wielded the kitchen like an artist's studio had become a puzzle he was desperate to solve, though he kept his curiosity veiled beneath polite indifference. But the sanctuary of the mansion was disturbed when Eleanor Hayes, Colton's mother, returned like a cold gust sweeping through warm air. Eleanor, with her perfectly manicured nails and sharp words, sized up Scarlett in a heartbeat, her eyes narrowing with disapproval. "Colton, you must be careful," she warned in that clipped tone that had made him shrink into himself for years. "She's just an ordinary girl, nothing like the women you should be with." Her words were laced with disdain for anything that didn't come with the perfect pedigree or social status. And for once, Colton felt a flicker of rebellion ignite inside him. His reply was quick, a rare flash of defiance that surprised even himself. "Maybe ordinary isn't what I'm looking for." But despite this fleeting courage, his heart remained a fortress, locked tight against vulnerability. Eleanor's warnings echoed in the corridors of his mind, planting seeds of doubt he tried to push away. Yet every day spent watching Scarlett navigate the kitchen, her hands moving with purpose, her laughter cutting through the mansion's cold silence, made him question the rigid walls he had built around himself. He noticed how Scarlett didn't try to impress with flashy smiles or forced charm. Instead, she was genuine in her small acts of kindness, like leaving a bowl of fresh fruit by his study or remembering the way he liked his coffee. She had a resilience carved from hardship, a fierce independence that refused to be tamed, and it made Colton's pulse quicken with a feeling he hadn't dared to acknowledge in a long time. But the mansion held its own shadows, whispers of family expectations and unspoken rules that Eleanor embodied with ruthless precision. Her presence was a constant reminder that Colton's life was a delicate balancing act between duty and desire, and that choosing someone like Scarlett could unravel everything his family had painstakingly built. Colton's nights grew restless, haunted not just by memories of betrayal, but by the burgeoning hope that maybe, just maybe, this fiery woman could be the light to pierce through his darkness. Yet the walls he had sealed for so long fought back fiercely, and every time he glimpsed the vulnerability behind Scarlett's fierce gaze, he wondered what demons she was running from. Demons that could either shatter them both or bind them in ways they couldn't yet understand. Despite Eleanor's cold caution and his own fear of opening wounds too wide, Colton found himself lingering in the kitchen doorway, savoring moments when Scarlett's eyes would meet his, revealing flashes of pain and strength intertwined like two halves of a fragile whole. He realized that some eyes hold oceans, vast and unfathomable, but hers held storms, wild, untamed, and fiercely guarded secrets she hadn't spoken of. And in those silent moments, Colton felt the first true pull of connection, fragile but undeniable, growing stronger with each passing day. The mansion, once a cage of memories and silence, was slowly awakening with the quiet promise of something new. Something neither of them dared to name but both instinctively felt, a chance to rewrite the story written by past betrayals and hidden wounds, with the risk of heartbreak looming like a shadow they both refused to face just yet. Colton's mansion was alive with flickering candlelight and the soft clink of fine china as he prepared to host a dinner that he hoped would mark a new chapter in his life, a deliberate attempt to step out from the shadows of his past. He entrusted Scarlett with the evening's preparations, confident in her ability to orchestrate the night with her characteristic blend of precision and warmth, qualities he admired more deeply than he dared admit. As guests began to arrive, the atmosphere shimmered with polite conversation and the subtle dance of old alliances and new opportunities. But then, through the grand doorway, stepped a figure from his darkest memories, Madeline, the woman who had once promised forever, but had shattered his trust when she married Graham, his closest friend and now a business partner. The room's air thickened instantly, tension threading through the laughter and polite greetings like an invisible razor. Colton's smile tightened, barely concealing the storm raging beneath his calm exterior, while Scarlett observed quietly, her eyes flickering with quiet understanding. She moved through the evening with a grace that anchored him, her steady presence a balm to his frayed nerves, as if silently saying, "I see you, and I'm here." The dinner stretched on with strained conversations and pointed glances. Yet Scarlett's composure never faltered. She seemed to weave a protective shield around Colton, absorbing the awkwardness with gentle poise. When the last guest finally departed, leaving a stillness thick with unspoken emotions, Colton found himself drawn to the sanctuary of the kitchen where Scarlett was quietly washing dishes, the steam from the sink swirling around her like a soft embrace. In that small, dimly lit space, the walls that Colton had built to keep the world and his pain out began to crumble. He spoke hesitantly at first, words stumbling over memories too sharp to voice, recounting the betrayal that had hollowed his heart and left him questioning every bond he once held sacred. Scarlett listened with an intensity that was both tender and fierce, offering no judgment, only the rarest gift, a space to be truly heard. The silence between them was no longer a void, but a bridge, connecting two souls wounded by life, yet daring to hope. It was the first time someone heard his silence and answered with understanding, Colton thought, as the weight on his chest began to lift, if only slightly. He shared how Madeline's choice had felt like 1,000 knives, how Graham's betrayal had carved scars deeper than any wound, and how the years away hadn't healed, but only hardened his resolve to never trust again. Scarlett's gentle nods and soft words reminded him that pain shared was pain halved, and in her presence, the heavy loneliness that had defined his existence started to crack, letting in fragile rays of light. Their conversation flowed long into the night, the kitchen transforming from a place of mundane chores to a haven of connection and vulnerability. Colton realized that Scarlett's strength wasn't just in her defiant spark, but in her ability to hold space for his brokenness without flinching. As the hours slipped by, he found himself daring to imagine a future where past betrayals didn't dictate every heartbeat, where trust could be rebuilt not from grand gestures, but from moments like this, quiet, honest, and real. The mansion, once a fortress of solitude and silence, felt a little less empty, warmed by the presence of a woman who saw beyond his scars to the man beneath. And though the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with shadows, for the first time in a long while, Colton allowed himself to hope that healing could begin, not with loud declarations or sweeping changes, but in the gentle understanding exchange between two people who chose to listen. Scarlett's eyes, reflecting the dim kitchen light, held a promise unspoken but deeply felt, that he was not alone anymore, and perhaps in this unexpected companionship, they could both find a way out of their past. The night closed around them like a whispered secret, a fragile yet unbreakable thread tying two wounded hearts together in a silent pact of trust and tentative hope. Colton and Scarlett's connection deepened quietly, like a slow-burning ember glowing beneath a layer of ash, intense yet fragile, beautiful yet hidden. Each time their eyes met, there was a spark, a secret acknowledgement of feelings neither dared voice aloud. They danced around the truth, pretending the closeness between them was nothing more than friendship, even though every glance and lingering touch betrayed the yearning in their hearts. Both were prisoners of their past wounds, scared that admitting love would invite fresh pain. The mansion, once a cold, empty shell, began to breathe again with their subtle closeness, but the silence between their words grew heavier with every day. Then Eleanor Hayes returned like a storm on the horizon, bringing with her not warmth but control, suspicion, and an unrelenting desire to protect the Hayes legacy. Unwilling to accept Scarlett's growing influence on her son, Eleanor hired a new assistant chef under the guise of helping in the kitchen. But everyone knew the truth. It was to keep a watchful eye on Scarlett, to stifle the light she had brought into the house. The assistant's presence was an unspoken accusation, a reminder that Eleanor's disapproval wasn't just about class or status, but a warning that Scarlett didn't belong. The atmosphere grew tense, every meal prepared under scrutiny, every word exchanged measured and cautious. Colton felt the invisible walls closing in again, and despite his efforts to shield Scarlett, the pressure from his mother weighed on him like a relentless storm. Then came a night that shattered the fragile calm. Colton, wandering near the kitchen late after a long day, heard Scarlett's soft voice on the phone. At first it was just whispers, tender and hesitant, but as he listened closer, his breath caught. Scarlett was speaking gently to a child, words full of love and worry, yet never once had she told him about this part of her life. The revelation stung deeply, a secret she had kept buried, a world he was not allowed into. Confusion and heartbreak collided inside him. Why had she hidden something so important? Did she not trust him? Or was there shame, fear, something darker he could not yet understand? Instead of seeking answers, Colton recoiled, retreating into himself as the walls around his heart rebuilt. The warmth he had begun to feel with Scarlett cooled rapidly, replaced by a painful distance neither knew how to cross. Scarlett noticed the shift immediately, the sudden coldness in his eyes, the way his smile no longer reached them, the silence that filled the spaces where words once floated freely. Yet she said nothing, swallowed the hurt that welled inside her, and kept the secret locked tight. Both were trapped in a painful silence, where every unspoken word felt like a weight pressing down harder than the last. The mansion echoed with this quiet heartbreak, the rooms heavy with the absence of shared confidences and tender moments that might have been. Colton wrestled with his feelings, torn between love and doubt, yearning and mistrust, unsure if he could ever bridge the chasm that had opened between them. Scarlett, for all her fiery spirit, was fragile now, vulnerable in ways she had never allowed herself to be before. The unvoiced truth between them became a silent thunder, rumbling beneath the surface, threatening to break them apart. Sometimes heartbreak doesn't scream, it just stops showing up, Colton thought bitterly, the phrase like a mournful echo in the lonely chambers of his heart. And so, silence settled, a vast aching space that neither dared fill, even as their souls reached silently for each other in the dark. Theirs was a love paused, suspended between hope and despair, waiting for the moment when courage would shatter the quiet and reveal the truth they both so desperately needed to face. The storm outside raged like a wild beast unleashed, shaking the mansion's ancient windows and plunging the vast estate into darkness as the power flickered and died. For the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't heavy or filled with tension, but broken by the howling wind and the soft crackle of rain against the glass. Scarlett, undeterred by the blackout, moved with calm determination, lighting candles one by one, their golden flames casting warm, trembling shadows across the kitchen's cold surfaces. She began to prepare soup, the simple act grounding her amid the chaos, her hands steady as she stirred, the aroma of simmering herbs and vegetables filling the air with comfort. Colton found her there, the flickering candlelight outlining her graceful figure, her hair catching glimmers of amber in the dimness. The walls they had both built around their hearts, the ones thick with unspoken fears and unanswered questions, started to crack in that quiet kitchen. He moved closer, hesitantly at first, drawn by something deeper than desire, something fragile, yearning, and honest. The storm outside echoed the tempest inside them, but here, beneath the warm glow of candles, the tension softened into something tender. They shared the soup in near silence, their glances lingering longer than necessary, their breaths slow and synchronized as if the world outside had paused for them. Then without music, without ceremony, Colton reached out and took Scarlett's hand. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. They began to dance, a slow, tentative sway in the middle of the kitchen floor. Two souls moving in quiet harmony amid the flickering shadows. The air was thick with emotion, a mixture of hope and fear, relief and vulnerability. Colton's voice broke the silence as he confessed, his words raw and unguarded. "I'm tired of being lonely." Scarlett's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she replied softly, "I'm tired of hiding." In that moment, the walls that had kept them apart crumbled entirely, replaced by a fragile bridge of trust. Their faces drew closer until there was nothing left but the heat of their breath, mingling, the quiet thud of hearts rediscovering rhythm. Then, with a gentleness that spoke of healing rather than desire, Colton kissed her. It wasn't the reckless passion of a man lost in lust, but the tentative, searching kiss of a man learning to live again. One who had been buried in grief and was now breathing hope for the first time in years. Scarlett responded, her lips parting slightly, matching his hesitation with equal tenderness, both of them trembling with the weight of what this moment meant. A rebirth of love and trust. When he kissed her, it wasn't passion. It was permission to breathe again, to shed the armor that had kept his heart locked away. Around them, the storm's fury softened into a steady patter, as if nature itself was blessing this fragile new beginning. In that quiet kitchen bathed in candlelight, surrounded by shadows and warmth, Colton and Scarlett found not just each other, but a way back to life. A promise that even the deepest wounds could heal when met with courage and love. The night stretched on, silent but alive with possibility, and for the first time since his betrayal, Colton felt something he had thought lost forever, the stirring of hope. And Scarlett, too, found in his arms the strength to stop running, to stop hiding, and to finally let love in. The morning after the storm dawned cold and quiet over the Hayes mansion. Yet inside, a tempest was raging, a storm far fiercer than any thunder outside. Eleanor Hayes stood rigid in the grand kitchen, her sharp gaze fixed on Scarlett Monroe, with all the judgment and disdain a mother could muster when her world felt threatened. The air between them crackled with tension as Eleanor's voice sliced through the fragile calm, warning Scarlett in a low, chilling tone that her place in Colton's life was nothing but a dangerous illusion, a fleeting distraction he couldn't afford. But Scarlett, who had spent years hiding beneath masks of strength and silence, felt something inside her snap. She no longer had the energy or the will to be the quiet, invisible woman who never disturbed the calm surface. With trembling lips but unwavering eyes, she told Eleanor the truth she had kept locked away. A secret so deep it had haunted her for years. She was a mother. Her 5-year-old son was not some distant thought, but a living, breathing part of her life, safely nestled with her aunt far from the opulence and dangers of this mansion. The child was her reason for every sleepless night, every fight to survive, every moment she held back tears and pain. Scarlett spoke of her ex-husband, a man cruel enough to drive her into silence and shadows. A man whose name still made her flinch. She never wanted pity or charity, only the chance to live a life without fear and judgment. As she laid bare her past, the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Colton, standing just outside the kitchen door, felt his world tilt on its axis. Each word Scarlett spoke was like a knife cutting through the thick walls of his own guarded heart. He had seen her strength, her fire, but never this depth of pain and resilience. A tidal wave of emotions crashed over him. Regret for not seeing sooner, admiration for her courage, and a profound sorrow that this beautiful woman had carried such a heavy burden alone. His anger was not aimed at Scarlett, but at himself, for almost losing her before he had even truly found her. For the first time in a long while, he understood what it meant to love without reservation, to embrace not just the bright moments, but the scars and storms too. Yet just as hope began to bloom, Eleanor's shadow loomed larger. With a cold, hard warning, she made clear that Colton's pursuit of Scarlett would come at a price far greater than he imagined. His inheritance, his family name, even the life he had built, all could vanish if he chose love over duty. The weight of this ultimatum pressed heavily on Colton's shoulders, igniting a fierce battle within his soul. Could he stand against a legacy steeped in expectations and pride for a chance at true happiness? Scarlett watched him, sensing the conflict but remaining silent, her heart aching with the knowledge that love sometimes demanded sacrifice, unlike any other. In that quiet, charged moment, beneath the silent watch of a mansion that had known too much heartbreak, two wounded souls found a fragile connection, a promise that love, in all its imperfect glory, was worth fighting for, even if the road ahead was dark and uncertain. The walls of the mansion, long cold and hollow, began to whisper the possibility of healing, forgiveness, and a future where courage could rewrite the past. Together they stood on the edge of a new beginning, where truth was no longer a burden, but a bridge to something real, something lasting, something worth every tear and every risk. Colton stood silently outside the school gates, his hands trembling slightly as he watched Scarlett and her little boy play in the courtyard, their laughter mingling with the hum of children's voices and the rustling of spring leaves. It was the first time in months that he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to face the reality he had long avoided, accepting the love he had found and the family he never knew he wanted. Memories of his mother's cruel warnings echoed faintly in his mind, but they no longer held power over him. His heart was no longer a fortress of solitude, but a fragile vessel ready to embrace hope. As Scarlett's son looked up and noticed him, a hesitant smile blossomed on the boy's face, and Colton's chest tightened with emotion he could barely contain. Slowly, deliberately, Colton knelt down to meet the boy's gaze, his blue eyes soft and sincere, reflecting the stormy path he had traveled to this moment. "I'm sorry," Colton began, his voice raw yet steady, "for doubting you, for letting my fears blind me, and for not stepping forward sooner. But I want you both to know that I'm here now. Not just as a friend, but as someone who loves you and wants to protect you." Scarlett watched from a distance, tears shimmering in her eyes as the weight she had carried alone for so long began to lift. She saw in Colton not the wealthy, guarded man she had first met, but someone broken and healing, someone willing to fight for a future with her and her son. Just as a fragile peace seemed to settle between them, Eleanor Hayes appeared, her footsteps sharp and purposeful, a predatory gleam in her eyes as she approached, attempting to shatter the fragile bond growing stronger before her. "Colton, this is madness," Eleanor hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. "You can't throw away everything for a woman with secrets. I can solve this. I'll make sure Scarlett goes away, that she never threatens your future or our family's reputation." Colton's jaw tightened, the anger and pain bubbling beneath the surface, but he refused to be controlled any longer. "No, Mother," he said firmly, standing tall. "I'm done letting you dictate my life. This ends now." With unexpected courage, he revealed the manipulations, the threats, and the lies Eleanor had used to keep him under her thumb, exposing the toxic hold she had over him and the damage it caused to everyone involved. The gathering crowd fell silent, the truth settling like dust after a storm. Scarlett stepped forward, her voice steady and clear despite the pounding of her heart. "I never asked for sympathy or charity," she said, "only a chance to be seen for who I am, strong, flawed, but worthy of love and respect." Eleanor's eyes flashed with fury, but Colton and Scarlett stood united, the walls of deception crumbling before their shared resolve. As Eleanor stormed away in defeat, Colton reached out, taking Scarlett's hand gently, feeling the warmth and strength that had kept her standing through so much. Together they walked back to the mansion, no longer a place of cold echoes, but a home ready to be filled with laughter, light, and love. In the kitchen where they first met, surrounded by the scent of freshly baked bread and the glow of candlelight, Colton dropped to one knee, the nervousness of a man who had lost and found himself mingling with unshakable certainty. "Scarlett," he whispered, "will you marry me? Will you be the family I never thought I deserved?" Tears of joy and relief spilled down Scarlett's cheeks as she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Their lips met in a kiss soft and deep, sealing a promise forged through heartbreak, forgiveness, and the courage to love, despite the scars of the past. Her son watched, eyes wide with wonder, As if sensing that this moment marked the beginning of a new story, one where love conquered fear and broken hearts found healing. In that kitchen, the mansion's empty walls were replaced by the echoes of new memories, laughter that would never fade, and the blazing fire of a family reborn. Colton's journey from shattered loneliness to the fullness of love was complete, not because his life was perfect, but because he had chosen to embrace imperfection and vulnerability. Together, they faced an uncertain future, but it was theirs to shape, fueled by trust, honesty, and a love fierce enough to overcome any storm. The world outside might still be harsh and unforgiving, but within these walls they had built a sanctuary where hearts could heal and dreams could flourish. And as the night sky lit up with distant fireworks, Colton whispered into Scarlett's hair, "I left a broken man, but I return whole because of you, because of us." And in that moment, surrounded by love and light, the mansion was truly home again.